Okay, in this video I'm going to show you guys how to model something sort of like this. In my case this is a wooden top. Um, and I'm going to be using a technique called Revolve. And what it does is you draw out a curve around the silhouette of your object, right, on one side. And then what you do is you revolve it under the Surfaces tab. And then what that does is it rotates that curve around and generates a shape that is based on that silhouette you drew. So what kind of objects is this good for? This is good for anything that is radially symmetrical. And when I mean radially symmetrical, I'm sure you guys all understand the idea of symmetry at this point, right? If something is symmetrical around, let's go and turn on the grid. The x-axis, right? That means that on this side, it is the same as it is on this side, right? So on the left and right hand side of the scene, it's the mirror exact copy of itself. If it's symmetrical across the z-axis, front and back, it's the same, and y-axis, up and down, it's the same. Radial symmetry is a little bit different, in that, let's go ahead and I'm going to pull this up, and I'm going to turn off my selection highlighting so you can see this. Imagine, actually, let's go ahead and move this down so we can see that arrow going through. All right, so you can see the y-axis kind of intersecting right in the middle of that object. Radially symmetrical means that no matter which direction I'm looking in away from that axis or around that axis, it is the exact same on any other point around that axis. So if I'm looking out in this direction from the center of the object, it's going to look the exact same as if I looked out from this direction. Essentially, it's like spinning a baseball bat or a candlestick or something like that. So what kind of objects would you want to do this for? You'd want to do this for anything that is going to be obviously a complex silhouette, so something like this wooden top or a railing or a candlestick or an arch, like a fancy arch. So anything that's radially symmetrical and also has a really complex silhouette to it. Something that I wouldn't do this on that would be radially symmetrical would be more basic objects. Like I said earlier, I mentioned a baseball bat, but a baseball bat's just so simple, it'd be easier just to model that by with traditional box modeling techniques. Okay, so let's dive into how to do this. So let me go ahead and delete that, and I'm going to delete that. And I'm going to go ahead and bring back my selection highlighting. So I loaded it in my reference image. I'm going to want to go to a front or side view. The reason why I want to do that is because I want, when I draw out my curve, I want to snap flat, right? So you see when I had this curve right here is flat right here. But if you draw your curves, and I'll show you really quickly what that looks like. If you draw your curves in the perspective view, it's actually going to snap to the floor. And so that gets a little bit confusing. So it's better to just do this from the front view. All right. I'm going to be using the EP curve tool. So what it does is I draw out points, and it draws a curve between the points I place. So I'm going to click on that. I'm going to double click on the tool to open the tool settings. I am using cubic curve degrees. So let me show you what that looks like. As soon as I draw a third point, you'll see it's a linear line on the second point. Third point, now I'm starting to draw a curve. And what's happening is the tool is interpolating the shape of this curve between these points. Okay, so that's how I can get this really, not really smooth, but fairly smooth curve with very few points. If I do linear, right, there's no interpolation. It's a straight line between each point. And there's some other ones, like I could do 5. Let's see. And that just kind of changes the smoothness of that curve. But I'm just going to be using cubic. Okay. So let's go ahead and close that. And I don't need that tree editor open either. So I'm going to start from the top of my object. And I purposely lined up my reference image in the middle of my scene. Just because I like to have my objects centered and symmetrical as much as possible. I'm just going to start from the very center. Okay. One thing I will say is you don't really need a lot of points for this, right? Some people might have the tendency to do something like this where you're literally drawing out the shape as close as possible with points. But because we're using the curve tool, it's going to be simulating kind of the experience of us using the smooth preview mode on our low poly model. And so we don't, because this curve is kind of making smoother transitions for us, we don't have to draw out everything explicitly. One thing I will say is if anywhere I want to have like a crease or a sharp edge, I might drop in more than one edge, or like really tightly pack some verts next to each other, or control vertices. Okay. So I'm just going to go through here. For the sake of this demo, I'm not going to be super precise. I do know right here there's going to be a crease. You can see there's like this sharp transition right here. So I'm going to drop in some tighter packed verts right there. Okay. Same thing right here. It's just like when you're doing modeling your a model traditionally, a polygon model traditionally, and you want to if you do smooth preview, but you want to make sure certain edges have a sharper edge, you just put more points or more edges closer to that area, right? So if I want a sharp edge right here, I put a vertice right here and right here on the opposite sides. I'm gonna do the same thing right there. Okay. Like I said, I'm not right now. Once you get a hang of this tool and making this transition, you'll worry about perfecting it and getting this super nice. But I'm kind of just going through this for the sake of the demo, and I don't want to get bogged down too much in making this look as perfect as possible. Okay. So I'm approaching the end here, thankfully. And also what's nice about this is I can just edit the curve afterwards. If I make a kind of like a mistake or something didn't turn out perfect, but I did a lot of work already, I know that I can come back and just tweak those placements of those vertices afterwards. So once you're done drawing, you press enter on your keyboard. Okay. You're going to right click on your curve and go to control vertex. But before I do that, I'm going to select my image. And I'm going to go to the attribute editor, go to the second tab. I'm going to bring down the alpha on that just so I can see especially if you have white in your image, it's really high contrast. It can get kind of hard to see. So what I would do is I would come in here and I would actually start to edit these points in the control vertex editing component mode. Okay. And you can see here from these points, the part that it's highlighting on the curve shows the part that this vertice is affecting. So this control vertex I have right here is affecting all the way up to here, down to here. And it looks like this one is actually to the right of it, or it's affecting the curve to the right of this control vertices. But you can see this is actually, this vertice is controlling up this way, and this one's actually below it. It's controlling all the way down here. So I actually might just space them out a little bit and then rearrange them. That just happens sometimes when you convert it. All right, so just trying to, the fewer points you have, the better, or the easier it is to edit. Just like when you're doing poly modeling, the fewer polygons you have, usually the easier it is for you to work with. So here's another instance, oops. This one probably a little bit lower. This one's at that juncture point. This one right here is on the other side. This is pretty flat. So I'm just making a decision here to make this like a flatter edge, sharper corner. All right, I don't want to go through. I'm going to pause this and then come back when I'm okay. There's some areas that I wanted to try to add another point in after the fact. So in order to do that, what I did was I selected my curve, went to curve point mode, click and drag where you want that point to be. Okay, so let's say I want to put it there. I'm going to add another one right here too. And we're going to come up to the curves and we're going to click on this button right here, insert knot. Okay. And now when I come back to my control vertice mode, now there is a new point there that wasn't there before. So that just gave me a little extra control in some of my areas. That's not necessarily a spot I wanted to have it in, but that's what I had to do down here because I wasn't getting the curvature just quite right. But yeah, so after editing it all, I was just really focusing on trying to match that curvature of my shape. Okay. And so once I got to the point where I'm happy, I'm going to go to object mode, and I'm going to go to surfaces, revolve, and we're going to open this up. So let's first go to perspective mode so we can see this object in 3D. So I'm going to go to surface, revolve, open the tool settings for that one. And I'm going to show you guys the default. So your default should look something like this. I'm going to come down here. First thing I want to do is I don't want NURBS surfaces. I want a polygon object. Okay. Let's go ahead and just use what we have here, and I'll show you guys what this looks like. So this one uses triangles, so that's no good. So the first thing I want to do is I want to switch this to quads. Okay. All right. So this seems like it looks good at first glance, but the problem is there's some n-gons here, right? So you can see this edge right here terminates right in the middle of this polygon, so it splits that edge into two. If I do smooth preview, you see those are, that's a 5-sided polygon. Select this object, go mesh, clean up, select faces with more than 4 sides. So you can see there's quite a few faces with more than 4 sides. So I'm going to Control Z back, open that back up again. So I'm going to make sure I'm doing quads. And instead of that standard fit, I'm going to be doing general. So I do general, and then I'm going to come down to U and V type. I'm going to change these from per surf number of isoparms in 3D to per span number of isoparms. Okay, if I don't do this, this is what it looks like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change that down to per span number. Okay, so that looks pretty good. No n-gon issues that I can see. Problem is, it's a little too high poly, probably more than I'm going to need, right? If there's not really any good reason for this to be this high poly. So I'm going to Control Z back, and I'm going to come down to these numbers, number U and number V. I'm going to drop this down to 1. Click Apply. There you go. That's way lower poly and probably closer to what I want. And I can get that shape I want by just going to the smooth mode, right? Smooth preview mode. But let's see. One other thing I might do is I might feel like this is got too few faces going this way around the y-axis. Right now it's 8, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to Control Z back. We're going to switch this to 12. Okay, and that looks a little bit better to me. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and close this. I'm going to have to flip my verts, or flip my normals, because right now we're looking at the backs of my faces. So I'm going to go ahead and go to mesh display, reverse. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and hide that. I'm going to assign a blend material. That's just for me because I like to look at the surface, and press 3 for smooth preview. You can see it's pretty darn good looking, right? It'd require a lot more editing. Like you could model this out of just a cylinder or even a sphere in some cases. But in this case, it was a lot easier to get this very complex kind of silhouette to this object just by drawing out that curve. What's cool about this is I can actually come in here and edit this shape still because they still are connected through history. Okay, so I come to my object, my polygon object, you'll see we have revolve right here, this right here. And so that piece of history that's attached to this object is still connecting this object to this curve. So we can actually come in here and we can play around with that shape. You can do the same thing with just by editing your vertices, of course, but this could be a really fun way of just kind of exploring and trying to get the perfect shape and really refining and editing that. So let me go ahead and undo that for a second. And that's why when I was doing this earlier, I get this kind of insane shape going. So I'm going to go ahead and Control Z, get that back. If I want to disconnect that curve, I probably could just delete the curve. Or what you could also do is, especially if you want to keep the curve for future reference, you just select my object, go edit, delete by type, history. Okay, So one thing I'm going to have to do to fix some of these things is my silhouette got lost a little bit, right, because of my model being fairly low poly. So I'd probably come in and I would use the multi-cut tool, holding Control middle mouse click to add some edges. I would open up the tool settings, turn on edge flow, so that's a 0.85, so that when I drop this in, it actually tries to match the silhouette a little bit. So that can help you a little bit. Or what I could do is I could select an edge loop, turn on soft select, and scale it in 2 axes at once. So I don't want to scale it this way because they're also going to move up and down, right? Especially if I'm using soft select. So this is actually scaling in the z-axis as well. If I click on these little squares, it's only scaling in the x and z axis instead of the y-axis. So I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to use soft select, scale. I'm just going to scale it out a little bit just so we can match that shape just slightly better. And the more edges you add, the harder this kind of editing gets. Let's go ahead and I'm going to drop that down, or turn off soft select for that one, try to match it out, that sharper edge. And if I really need a sharp edge, let's come out, right? Looks pretty good, but you can see the normals are starting to get a little step right there. I can come in here and I could either drop in, holding Control and left clicking with the multi-cut tool on either side of that. See, that's a much sharper edge. Of course, it edits the curve on either side, so you have to be careful of that. Or the other thing I could do is I could use the bevel tool for dropping and holding edges on either side. So I'll set it to segments 2, bring the fraction down so they're really close to each other. You see in flat shaded mode, that's what it looks like. And there you go. That would be another way you could do it. And if there's any faces or any areas that I want it to be flat, if vertically it's pretty easy to do, right? Because I can just grab all these guys right here and just scale them down in the y-axis so they're flat. This gets a little bit harder right here. So if, let's say this was scaled out a little bit, even though I wanted this to be flat, what I'd probably do is I'd come in here, I'd probably hold Control Delete to get rid of the that vertices and edges right there between the flat surfaces that I want. And then I would just probably use the multi-cut, but with the edge flow turned off, so it draws in a flat curve. And I just put in a few edges here. And so that gives me a very, very flat shape. So the last thing I would have to do is I'd have to clean up the tops and bottoms. So you see there's a pinch right here, and that's because these aren't actually, these ones might actually be merged if you get it right in the middle, but I don't think that's actually the case. So I'm going to select that, and I'm just going to go to Edit Mesh, Merge to Center. Right? So you can see those vertices actually combine together. And I can do the same thing at the bottom as well. Okay, I'll just press G to redo. And as always, just clean up your history on your object. So edit, delete by type, history. And there you go. So that's how you could model something with a really complex silhouette that is radially symmetrical using the Revolve tool.